The decision to fight any particular case tends to be fairly arbitrary, some sort of madness. My own recorded comments about the Sutcliffe writ was, "She'll never go to court," which shows how good I am at spotting them. This was the wife of the Yorkshire Ripper, who the Eye accused of doing a deal with the Daily Mail for £250,000 for her story. And 6 years later, she sent in a writ, and the jury went completely bonkers and awarded her the highest libel settlement ever.
Guinness Book of Records, 600,000. He's in the Guinness Book of Records. I was never in the Guinness Book of Records.
The victims of the Yorkshire Ripper, for being attacked by a mass murderer, got an average of £7,000 apiece. Now you can do the maths. You get 100 times more for being attacked by a small circulation magazine like Private Eye. I made quite a song and dance at the time about the discrepancy between personal injury awards and libel awards, which I thought was incredibly unfair. As it happens, the appeal court did as well. The 600,000 came down to 60,000.
She sat there all the time making notes of what was being said.
Oh dear, that's completely bonkers.
Well, I don't say that, no, I mean, that's... Well, you can get hooked on it. She got a liking for actual litigation, for actually sitting in court.
Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have for you a true crime case, a word in Romanian, and I will also be doing my makeup. And today we are carrying on with the Yorkshire Ripper, a suggestion from Tom. So the word in Romanian for today is șofer. 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 Well done, guys. You just said driver. I suggest before you start watching this part, go ahead and watch part 1, because I'm going to jump straight in carrying on from the first part, so it might not make a lot of sense for you if you are watching this part before watching part 1. Okay, so on 25th of November 1980, Trevor Birdsall, a friend of Peter's and the unintended getaway driver in Peter's first documented assault in 1969, reported Peter to police as a suspect. In total, Peter had been questioned by police 9 separate times in connection with the Ripper inquiry, before his eventual arrest and conviction. 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill, a student at Leeds University, was murdered on the night of 17th of November 1980. She was going back home to her student's hall of residence in Headingley, Leeds, when Peter delivered a blow to her head before removing her clothing and stabbing her repeatedly in the chest and once in the eye with a screwdriver. On 2nd of January 1981, Peter was stopped by the police with 24-year-old prostitute Olivia Rivers in the driveway of Light Trades House on Melbourne Avenue, Broomhill, Sheffield, South Yorkshire. That was a handful. A police check by probationary constable Robert Hydes revealed that Peter's car had false number plates. Peter was arrested and transferred to Dewsbury Police Station in West Yorkshire. He was questioned in relation to the Ripper case because he matched many of the physical characteristics of the killer. The next day, Sergeant Robert Ring, having a hunch, decided to go back to the scene of the arrest. And it was a good call because he discovered a knife, hammer and rope that Peter got rid of behind an oil storage tank when he briefly slipped away after telling police that he was bursting for a pee. Peter hid a second knife in the toilet cistern at the police station when he was allowed to use the toilet. The police obtained a search warrant for his home in Heaton and brought his wife in for questioning. When Peter was stripped at Dewsbury Police Station, he was wearing an inverted V-necked jumper under his trousers. The sleeves were pulled over his legs and the V-neck exposed his genital area. The front of the elbows were padded to protect his knees as he knelt over his victims' bodies. I mean, honestly, I can't even picture that V-neck jumper upside down, legs upward. So you basically got the sleeves on your legs and the neckline in the middle down there, and so everything is exposed down. I can't even picture it. I don't know, you guys. I don't know what's going on. Some people are just beyond. I can't even find the word. But anyway, the sexual implications of this outfit were considered obvious, but it wasn't known to the public until being published in 2003. After 2 days of intensive questioning on the afternoon of 4th of January 1981, Peter Sutcliffe suddenly said that he was the Yorkshire Ripper. Over the next day, he described his many attacks. A few weeks later, he claimed that God told him to kill the women. He told police, "The women I killed were filth, bastard prostitutes who were littering the streets. I was just cleaning up the place a bit." Yeah. Peter only showed regret when talking about his youngest murder victim, Jane MacDonald, and when he was questioned about the killing of Joanne Harrison, he denied responsibility. Joanne's murder was linked to the Ripper killings by the Wearside Jack claim, but in 2011, DNA evidence revealed that the crime was actually committed by convicted sex offender Christopher Smith, who died in 2008. Peter Sutcliffe was charged on 5th of January 1981. At his trial, he pleaded not guilty to 13 charges of murder, but guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The basis of his defense was that he claimed to be the tool of God's will. Peter said he heard voices that ordered him to kill prostitutes while working as a grave digger, which he said originated from the headstone of a Polish man, Bronislaw Zapolski, and the voices were those of God. Peter pleaded guilty to 7 charges of attempted murder. The prosecution intended to accept his plea after 4 psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, but the trial judge, Justice Sir Leslie Boram, demanded an unusually detailed explanation of the prosecution's reasoning. After a 2-hour representation by the Attorney General, Sir Michael Havers, a 90-minute lunch break, and 40 minutes of legal discussion, the judge rejected the diminished responsibility plea and the expert testimonies of the psychiatrists, insisting that the case should be dealt with by a jury. The trial was set to begin on 5th of May 1981. It lasted for 2 weeks, and Peter Sutcliffe was found guilty of murder on all counts and was sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment. The jury rejected the evidence of the 4 psychiatrists who gave testimony that Peter had paranoid schizophrenia. It's possible their decision was influenced by the evidence of a prison officer who heard Peter tell his wife that if he convinced people he was mad, he might get 10 years in a loony bin. And if you think about it, it really does make sense, because Sonia, his wife, if you remember from the first part, she had been diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic since early on in their marriage. So Peter had, just enough time to see her behavior and to see her behaviors and mimic them to convince others that he indeed had paranoid schizophrenia. And I think that it will make a bit more sense later on. And also, Peter, he evaded police so many times, so it's kind of, unbelievable that he had some kind of, paranoia or paranoid delusions to do with schizophrenia when he committed all of those murders, because I think from my point of view, he was in the right state of mind when he did it, especially considering the fact that he was almost caught by witnesses, and he knew that he needed to flee. So, you know, it kind of doesn't make sense that he would have paranoid schizophrenia when he used logic when he committed the murders and also when he escaped, so he's not caught. And also, I mean, what are the odds that both him and his wife suffer with the same condition? I don't know, guys, you tell me. You have to let me know in the comments below what you think. The judge stated that Peter was beyond redemption and he recommended a minimum term of 30 years to be served before parole could be considered, meaning that Peter Sutcliffe would have been unlikely to be freed until at least 2011. On 16th of July 2010, the court issued Peter with a whole life tariff, meaning he was never to be released. After his trial, Peter admitted to 2 more attacks. It was then decided that prosecution for these offences was not in the public interest. West Yorkshire Police made it clear that the victims wanted to remain anonymous. West Yorkshire Police was heavily criticised for being unprepared for an investigation of this scale. This was one of the largest investigations by a British police force, and it was before the use of computers. Information on suspects was stored on handwritten index cards. Apart from storing and accessing the paperwork, the police faced significant challenges in trying to effectively manage and process the overwhelming amount of information generated by such a large manual system. The manual system required officers to manually sort through and organize physical files, documents, and records. This process was highly labor-intensive, time-consuming, and prone to human errors, making it difficult for police to keep up with the increasing volume of information. Searching for specific information or connections between cases could be incredibly challenging. Officers had to manually review and cross-reference multiple files and documents to identify any relevant information, which was, again, like I said, time-consuming and inefficient. Peter Sutcliffe was interviewed 9 times, but all of the information police had about the case was stored in paper form, which made cross-referencing difficult. Then the TV appeals as well for information generated thousands more documents. There was a review of the police investigation into the Yorkshire Ripper case. The Inspector of Constabulary Lawrence Byford's 1981 report was not released by the Home Office until 1st of June 2006. The Byford report's major findings were contained in a summary published by the Home Secretary William Whitelaw, showing for the first time precise details of the messed up police investigation. Byford described delays in following up vital tip-offs from Trevor Birdsall, who on 25th of November 1980 sent an anonymous letter to police saying, "I have good reason to know the man you're looking for in the Ripper case. This man has dealings with prostitutes and always had a thing about them. His name and address is Peter Sutcliffe, 5 Garden Lane, Heaton, Bradford Clerks, Shipley." Trevor's letter was marked priority number 1. An index card was created on the basis of the letter, and the policewoman found that Peter already had 3 existing index cards in the records. But for some reason, said the Byford report, the papers remained in a filing tray in the incident room until Peter's arrest on 2nd of January 1981, the next year. Peter's friend Trevor visited Bradford Police Station the day after he sent a letter to emphasize his suspicion about Peter. He said that he was with Peter when he got out of a car to pursue a woman with whom he had an argument at a bar in Halifax on 15th of August 1975, the date and place of the olive smelt attack. The report compiled on the visit was lost, even though a search took place after Peter's arrest, according to the Byford report. Byford said the failure to take advantage of Birdsall's anonymous letter and his visit to the police station was yet again a stark illustration of the progressive decline in the overall efficiency of the major incident room. It resulted in Sutcliffe being at liberty for more than a month when he might conceivably have been in custody. Thankfully, there is no reason to think he committed any further murderous assaults within that period. The Byford report into the investigation concluded the ineffectiveness of the major incident room was a serious handicap to the Ripper investigation. While it should have been the effective nerve center of the whole police operation, the backlog of unprocessed information resulted in the failure to connect vital pieces of related information. This serious fault in the central index system allowed Peter Sutcliffe to continuously slip through the net. The temptation to appoint a senior man on age or service grounds should be resisted. What is needed is an officer of sound professional competence who will inspire confidence and loyalty. End of quote. George Oldfield, who was leading the investigation, focused on the hoax tape, ignoring advice from survivors of Peter's attacks, from several specialists, from the FBI in the US, and from dialect analysts Stanley Ellis and Jack Windsor Lewis. The advice was that Wearside Jack was a hoaxer, but it seems that George, the investigator, believed that he was smarter than everybody else. The investigation used the hoax tape as a point of elimination rather than a line of inquiry, allowing Peter to avoid scrutiny as he didn't fit the profile of the sender of the tape or letters. Wearside Jack Hoaxer was given unusual credibility when analysis of saliva on the envelopes he sent showed that he had the same blood group as Peter left at crime scenes, a type shared by only 6% of the population. The hoaxer appeared to know details of the murders that apparently had not been released to the press, but which, in fact, he got from his local newspaper and from pub gossip. The Leeds Revolutionary Feminist Group organized a number of Reclaim the Night marches. They also criticized the police for victim blaming, especially for the suggestion that women should remain indoors at night. 11 marches across the United Kingdom took place on the night of 12th of November 1977, making the point that women should be able to walk anywhere without restriction and that they should not be blamed for men's violence. The attitude within the West Yorkshire police during the time of the Yorkshire Ripper case was reflective of Peter Sutcliffe's own misogyny and sexist attitudes, as stated by multiple sources. A senior West Yorkshire detective, Jim Hobson, expressed this attitude in a press conference in October 1979 when he stated that the perpetrator hated prostitutes and that the police would continue to arrest them. However, he acknowledged that the Ripper was now killing innocent girls, suggesting a concerning mental state and the need for medical attention. Joanne Smith, in her book Misogynist, highlighted that even Peter himself did not go as far as portraying such extreme misogyny during his trial, instead claiming to be demented at the time. During Peter's trial in 1981, the Attorney General, Sir Michael Havers, King's Counsel, stated in his opening statement that although some of Peter's victims were prostitutes, it was particularly tragic that some of them were not. This statement actually received backlash from the English collective of prostitutes who protested outside the Old Bailey. Nina Lopez, one of the protesters in 1981, argued that Havers' comments demonstrated the problematic manner in which the police and the establishment were handling the Yorkshire Ripper case. Overall, these accounts suggest that the police and authorities involved in the investigation exhibited sexist attitudes towards prostitutes and failed to properly acknowledge the seriousness of the crimes against both prostitutes and other women targeted by the Yorkshire Ripper. The language, tone and terminology used by the West Yorkshire Police during the original investigation into Peter Sutcliffe were deemed inappropriate and offensive. In November 2020, 9 months after receiving a letter from one of the victim's sons, on behalf of several families, the police finally issued an apology for their past actions. But I'm telling you, if the families wouldn't have sent, they would never have apologized. This is just my view on it. The Byford report, the comprehensive review of the original investigation, also highlighted the possibility that Peter Sutcliffe committed more crimes than those officially attributed to him. The report noted a suspicious pause in his criminal activities between 1969 and 1975 before his first documented murder. It concluded that during this period, Peter likely targeted and attacked unaccompanied women who not only in West Yorkshire and Manchester, but also in other parts of the country. The report also described Peter as an otherwise unremarkable young man in 1969 when he first came to the attention of the police due to his involvement in incidents with prostitutes. The Byford report shed light on the police's missed opportunity to apprehend him and the need for a thorough re-examination of the case. Later that year, in September 1969, Peter was arrested in Bradford's red light area for being in possession of a hammer, an offensive weapon, but he was charged with going equipped for stealing as it was assumed that he was a potential burglar. The report said it was clear Peter had on at least one occasion attacked a Bradford prostitute with a blunt weapon. Police identified a number of attacks that matched Peter's MO and tried to question the killer, but he was never charged with any other crimes. Only days after Peter's conviction in 1981, crime writer David Yallop asserted that he may have been responsible for the murder of 20-year-old Carol Wilkinson, who was randomly bludgeoned over the head with a stone in Bradford on 10th of October 1977, 9 days after the murder of Jean Jordan. Carol's murder was initially considered as a possible Ripper killing, but this was quickly ruled out as she was not a prostitute. Police eventually admitted in 1979 that the Ripper did not only attack prostitutes, but by this time a local man, Anthony Steele, had already been convicted of Carol's murder. David highlighted that Anthony had always protested his innocence and was convicted on weak evidence. He confessed to the murder under intense questioning, having been told that he would be allowed to see a solicitor if he confessed. Even though his confession didn't include any details of the murder, and the Ripper detective Jim Hobson testified at trial that he didn't find the confession credible, Anthony was still convicted. Around the time of Carol's murder, it was reported that Professor David G., the Home Office pathologist who conducted all the post-mortem examinations on the Ripper victims, noticed similarities between Carol's murder and the killing of Ripper victim Yvonne Pearson 3 months later. Just like Carol, Yvonne was bludgeoned with a heavy stone and was not stabbed. She was initially ruled out as a Ripper victim. Yvonne's murder was reclassified as a Ripper killing in 1979, while Carol's murder was not reviewed. Peter Sutcliffe didn't confess to Carol's murder at his trial. During his imprisonment, Peter was noticed to show particular anxiety at mentions of Carol Wilkinson. Peter knew Carol and he argued violently with her stepfather, over his advances towards her. He was familiar with the council estate where she was murdered and was in the area very often. In February 1977, a few months before the murder, he was reported to police for acting suspiciously on the street where Carol lived. Earlier on the day of Carol's murder, Peter went back to mutilate Jean Jordan's body before returning to Bradford. The location where Carol was killed was very close to Peter's job, where he would have clocked in for work that afternoon. In 2003, Anthony Steele's conviction was quashed after it was found that his low IQ and mental capabilities made him a vulnerable person to be questioned, discrediting his confession and confirming the crime writer David's suspicions that he was wrongfully convicted. David continued to push the theory that Peter was the real killer. In 2015, former detective Chris Clark and investigative journalist Tim Tate published a book, Yorkshire Ripper: The Secret Murders, which supported the theory that Peter killed Carol, pointing out that her body was posed and partially stripped in a way similar to the Ripper's MO. In 1982, West Yorkshire Police appointed Detective Keith Hallowell to lead a secret investigation into other possible victims of Peter Sutcliffe. A list was compiled of around 60 murders and attempted murders in Yorkshire and around the country, which West Yorkshire Police and other forces believed could possibly be linked to Peter Sutcliffe. Detectives were able to eliminate him from 40 of these cases, according to his lorry driver's logs, which showed which part of the country he was in when he was working. This left 22 unsolved crimes, which were investigated further. 12 of these were within West Yorkshire, while the others took place in other parts of the country. On 22nd of April 1966, shortly after 11:30 a.m., 66-year-old Fred Craven was murdered with a blunt instrument in his betting office above an antique shop in Wellington Street, Bingley. His wallet, which was believed to have £200 in cash, was stolen by the murderer. Peter's brother Michael, who was 16 at the time, was held for questioning, but he was eventually released and was ruled out as having any involvement in the crime. Peter, who was then 20 years old, knew Fred, who lived at 23 Cornwall Road. Peter's house was less than 100 yards away at 57 Cornwall Road. Peter also asked Fred's daughter to go out with him several times, but he was turned down. On 22nd of March 1967, taxi driver John Tommy, 27-year-old, picked up a passenger in Leeds who wanted to be driven to Bingley. He stopped near Bingley and the passenger in the back assaulted him with a hammer, hitting him in the head. When he regained consciousness, John was able to drive off and get help at a nearby cottage. He suffered a fractured skull with multiple lacerations and a fractured thumb. In 1981, a few weeks after Peter confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper, Detective Sergeant Des O'Boyle questioned John Tommy and showed him photos of different men, including one taken of Peter after his arrest for going equipped for theft in 1969, which John picked out as his attacker. On 11th of November 1974, while walking across a school playing field in Bradford between 7:30 and 8 p.m., Gloria Wood, 28 years old, met a man who offered to carry her bags. The man attacked her with a hammer. She sustained serious wounds, including a depressed skull fracture with a crescent-shaped wound that needed surgery to have bone shards removed from her brain. She was discovered drenched in blood after the attack was stopped by several youths who were nearby. Gloria described her attacker as 5 feet 8 inches tall, with black hair and a beard, which fitted Peter's description. 18-year-old Deborah Marie Debbie Schlesinger was stabbed through the heart as she walked down the garden path of her home in Hawksworth, Leeds. After a night out with friends on 21st of April, 1977. After she was stabbed, she was chased and then she collapsed and died in a doorway. Witnesses remembered seeing a dark, bearded man near the scene. There was no clear motive for her murder. Although a hammer wasn't used, Peter also often used a knife to stab his victims. Peter's work record also showed that he was delivering to an engineering plant 100 yards from Deborah's home on the day she was killed. Her murder took place 2 days before Peter's known killing of Patricia Atkinson in Bradford. At the time, detectives didn't think that Deborah's murder was a Ripper killing because she wasn't a prostitute. But by 2002, West Yorkshire Police publicly announced that they were ready to bring charges against Peter Sutcliffe for her murder, although no further action was taken. In 2017, West Yorkshire Police launched Operation Painthole to determine if Peter Sutcliffe was guilty of unsolved crimes dating back to 1964. In December 2017, West Yorkshire Police, in response to a Freedom of Information request, neither confirmed nor denied that Operation Painthole existed. There were many more attacks and murders which showed similarities with Peter's MO, but he was never convicted for any others. Following Peter Sutcliffe's conviction and incarceration, he chose to use the name Coonan, his mother's maiden name. He began his sentence at Agem Prison Parkhurst on 22nd of May 1981. Despite being found sane at his trial, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Attempts to send him to a secure psychiatric unit were blocked. While at Parkhurst, he was assaulted by James Costello, a 35-year-old career criminal with several convictions for violence. On 10th of January 1983, he followed Peter into a recess of F2, the hospital wing at Parkhurst, and plunged a broken coffee jar twice into the left side of Peter's face, creating 4 wounds requiring 30 stitches. In March 1984, Peter was sent to Broadmoor Hospital under Section 47 of the Mental Health Act 1983. His wife obtained a separation around 1989 and a divorce in July 1994. On 23rd of February 1996, Peter was attacked in his room in Broadmoor's Henley ward. Paul Wilson, a convicted robber, asked to borrow a videotape before trying to strangle Peter with a cable from a pair of stereo headphones. After an attack with a pen by inmate Ian Kay on 10th of March 1997, Peter lost the vision in his left eye and his right eye was severely damaged. Ian admitted trying to kill Peter and was ordered to be detained in a secure mental hospital without limit of time. In 2003, it was reported that Peter Sutcliffe developed diabetes. Peter's father died in 2004 and he was cremated. On 17th of January 2005, Peter was allowed to visit Arnside where the ashes had been scattered. The decision to allow the temporary release was initiated by David Blunkett and ratified by Charles Clarke when he became Home Secretary. On 22nd of December 2007, a 4th attack on Peter was made by fellow inmate Patrick Sureda, who lunged at him with a metal cutlery knife while shouting, "You effing raping murdering bastard, I'll blind your effing other one." On 17th of February 2009, it was reported that Peter was fit to leave Broadmoor. An application by Peter Sutcliffe for a minimum term to be set, offering the possibility of parole after that date, was heard by the High Court on 16th of July 2010. The court decided that Peter Sutcliffe would never be released. Peter Sutcliffe spent the rest of his life in custody. On 4th of August 2010, Peter initiated an appeal against the decision. The appeal was rejected on 14th of January 2011. On 9th of March 2011, the Court of Appeal rejected his application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court. In December 2015, Peter Sutcliffe was assessed as being no longer mentally ill, and this is where I wanted to get when I said that maybe it will make sense a bit later that he might have just faked paranoid schizophrenia symptoms, just, you know, to try and get a lesser sentence. So he was assessed now as, not now in this moment, but then he was assessed as being no longer mentally ill. So my question is, I mean, I really don't know because I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional. This is just my, you know, my view on it. So if you have paranoid schizophrenia, as far as I'm aware, but please correct me if I'm wrong, you can never be cured of it. So I'm not sure how he could be assessed as being no longer mentally ill. Is paranoid schizophrenia not something that follows you your whole life once you are diagnosed with it? I'm not sure. Like I said, please do correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, this is what I think or what I know. Maybe I know it wrong. So that's why I said that perhaps he was faking it. In August 2016, a medical tribunal ruled that he no longer required clinical treatment for his mental condition and could be returned to prison. Peter Sutcliffe was reported to have been transferred from Broadmoor to Agent Prison Frankland in August 2016. Peter Sutcliffe died at University Hospital of North Durham, aged 74, on 13th of November 2020, after previously being returned to HMP Frankland following treatment for a suspected heart attack at the same hospital 2 weeks before. He had underlying health problems, including obesity and diabetes. He refused treatment for COVID-19.
In Leeds, Jim Hobson's new team of policemen has now taken over the Ripper inquiry. And already they claim to have had a pile of new information from the public. But they warn women who've been going out armed with knives and sharpened steel combs that they do risk arrest for carrying offensive weapons. The deep sense of fear and resentment that has built up in this Yorkshire community after 5 years of fruitless police inquiries into these brutal murders is hard to convey. But Martin Young has gone straight to the emotional heart of it.
I came to Leeds last week to report on the sad sequence to a dreadful killing, to follow the 13th murder hunt that struggled to find the Yorkshire Ripper. The scene here at Millgarth, the main police station in Leeds, was all too familiar. The Ripper incident room awash with statements of witnesses and reports, policemen working all around the clock. But somehow, here in the streets of West Yorkshire, there's a feeling that all the police can do is sift through the same evidence yet again. No, there's a much stronger feeling about. It's almost tangible. It's a feeling of deep revulsion, a wall of hate directed at the psychopath who's called himself Jack the Ripper. There have been 17 attacks now, 13 of them murders. The relatives and friends of those people attacked and murdered now number literally hundreds of people. But here in Leeds, there is no one who's not touched by the hatred the Ripper has spawned. I wanted to document that feeling of loathing. So I went to see some of the relatives of the victims. But it wasn't me they wanted to talk to. They wanted to talk directly to the Ripper himself. Mrs. Irene MacDonald. Her daughter was murdered in 1977.
I just see you as a beast with no feelings, and you're a coward. Why do you come up and stalk young girls, innocent girls as well? You come up from behind them, they don't have a chance. You're not a man, you're a beast. And I hate you. And I believe all the population in Leeds and everywhere hate you.
Mrs. Patricia Brandsburg. Her niece was murdered in 1977.
Jane was a beautiful girl. You took life from her. You destroyed her family in one way or another. Her father just deteriorated. You're not a man. You're despicable. I despise you intensely.
Mrs. Olive Smelt. She was attacked in 1975.
Oh, you can hit their headlines all right, but it's nothing to be proud of, the things that you do. And I just don't know how you can sleep at night.
Mr. Harry Smelt. His wife was attacked in 1975.
Of all the women you've killed, I think, if you were to take a census of them all, I think, given the opportunity to do as you wish with them, I think they would rate you pretty low sexually. I think that's what it's all about. You're proving you're a man by killing them. Most men don't have to kill women to prove that they're a man. Let's talk about real crimes, organising bank robberies and so on. I think you will be really a non-runner. It has to be women, and it has to be from behind.
Mr. Hayden Hiley. His daughter was murdered in 1979.
You are the lowest of the low. You did mention, I believe it was in your tape to the police, that you wanted to be mentioned in the Guinness Book of Records. I'll go along with that. You should be classed as the biggest coward the world has ever known. Put that in the Guinness Book of Records.
Mrs. Avril Hiley. Her daughter was murdered in 1979.
I think you're probably a very inadequate person, certainly physically, and probably mentally too. You're not significant at all. I don't think you can make a relationship with a woman, certainly not a live one. Possibly the only relationship you can make is with a dead one, as you've proved.
Maureen Long. She was attacked and stabbed in 1977.
Someone wants to get hold of you and do the same things to you as well. And which it might do. If they come face to face with you, you'd be better off killing yourself before someone else does it.
Mrs. Beryl Leach. Her daughter was murdered in 1979.
If I were you, I'd look over your shoulder. Somebody's looking for you. Many people are looking for you. And they all hate you.
Mr. David Leach. His daughter was murdered in 1979.
Frankly, I just think you're an obscenity on the face of the earth, and the sooner that you're caught and put away, it can't be soon enough for me. They should lock you away and throw away the key and forget about you for the rest of your life.
Well, I think the person who is harbouring the Ripper is as bad as he is. I cannot understand the mentality of anyone who could cohabitate with such a loathsome creature.
Well, my advice to you is this: give him up. If you're a young woman, there's lots of life for you, lots left. If you don't give him up, you'll be despised by every woman in the country. You'll probably hate yourself too. If you do give him up, you'll be admired by every woman, indeed everybody in the country.
You must think a lot about him after all he has done. You must know. There must be some way you must know it is him. Just think of us mothers, how we feel about our children, and how we must feel when we lose them to such a beast as him. You must give him up, surely. You must know that by now.
Because maybe he's going to hurt you in the end anyway. Aren't you frightened of that? Why don't you go straight and give him up, go to CID, give him up, because I'm sure you won't have to fear anything. And I think you'd be a much happier woman once you knew he'd been put away. Just like a lot more women will feel when he's been caught.
Every living person curses you. You can't even dig a hole for yourself because people would come and find you and drag you out.
People are frightened of the deeds you do. But you are probably a very insignificant little man.
You hit them from behind. You're a coward.
I wonder who you think you are. Do you damn well think you're God or something? God give life, God taketh it away, not you. I think you are the devil itself.
And this lovely people is the twisted, horrific story of the Yorkshire Ripper. I mean, to say that the police failed is an understatement. He could have been stopped much earlier. And again, I say, like with other cases I've covered before, because the victims, most of them were prostitutes, police didn't really give them much attention. And also comparing them as not human beings because they are prostitutes in comparison with the other victims who are not prostitutes. You know, it's despicable in my eyes, really. It's just disgusting. Anyway, guys, please do let me know what do you guys think in the comment section down below. In particular, I'm really interested to hear your view if Peter Sutcliffe fake paranoid schizophrenia or indeed he did have it and he was somehow cured of it. Thank you guys so much for staying with me. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!